You all for coming today. Sticking around. So here's the deal. I'm moderating this discussion. I'm also a part of it, supposedly. But I think it's also cool that we have Richard Heilbrun up here. So I wanted to go ahead and put Richard on the spot and ask him, before we open up to questions, I just want to ask him if he had any reflections on what we've discussed this morning that he would like to relate, or like anything that just really, makes him excited to be here today.
It's a great question. Can you guys hear me, or do we need to pass the microphone around? Yes. The common theme with all the morning presentations are that we can accomplish wonderful things by being here and by doing things. And there are a great number of examples, of conservation examples, where that very thing has happened. And it frequently starts with an individual or a group of individuals that believe strongly about something and want to fix it. And so my reflections are that we have a history of fixing things, and we have a history of noticing things that need to be fixed, and this is the right group, and this is the right environment, and this is the right time to have this discussion and start taking action.
Cool. Well, all right. Now that we've gotten a sense of his interests, do you guys have any questions that anybody wants to lead off with for any of the panelists up here?
I would like the panel to address, as possible, advocacy means youth outreach, because I know Cibalo is involved in youth programs, Riverside Nature Center is involved. It seems to be, my experience, youth are very curious to start with. They don't have a political agenda. If you're doing something with young people, you may just engage the parents. So I'd like the panel could just maybe comment on their experience with youth programs and success or failures or problems they encountered.
Also, I like that question. So I'm going to go ahead and just take the helm here real quick, since you brought up the Nature Center. I almost had a slide up on my presentation about educating youth, because I do think it's extremely important. I'm sorry. The question was about teaching youth. Does that kind of count as advocacy? Is that a part of the equation? And how, if so, or if not, how do we make that a part of the equation? So yes, I would say that it's definitely a part of the equation. We're teaching the next generation to care. The other thing too is that oftentimes we find that people have shifted to recycling plastics, glass, and other things because their kids found out about recycling and said, "No, Mom, don't put that in there." And then they pick it up and they put the take something out of the trash and put it in the recycling bin. That's actually a very powerful motivator. I think though with a lot of our education, we aren't necessarily advocating to the children about what they can do. I mean, it's a lot of those small things, but there's also those things, just like recycling, that you need to kind of bug your parents about. Hey, Mom, Dad, why don't we have LED lights? They use a lot less energy. We really should have LED lights. That kind of, all these other things that they can actually bring the pressure home, so that we can create some effective change at home. Rufus has.
That's obviously, the 4-H model was that they, trying to teach the parents good agricultural practices was so difficult that it was easier to teach the kids, the next generation of farmers, how to do it. And what Ben just expressed is the modern day version of that the previous generation really wasn't into recycling, and that really wasn't part of their consciousness, but it is part of, and can be part of the next generation's consciousness. And I think that's the opportunity with youth education. I don't think it changes. I don't think the youth are going to raise $4 million, by educating them today. But they are the people that are going to conserve, those sweet spots in the future. And so, or rebuild our cities where they're more resilient to flooding, and such as that. So it's a long-term investment. Youth are.
But there is also a body of research that says right now that what youth are learning can be extended to, like you said, the parents are learning it too through their youth learning it, and that can turn into action. Of course, that is a long way around. And I'd also argue too, like you said, that we have things that need to be done today. And that takes education of adults and people who are voting and voting to make those changes.
One thing, I'm going to give you a super concrete example of how this could work out. When we decided to daylight the Prairie in Houston and bring the story back, we needed people to go out to these urban prairies and interpret them for the general public. Because the general public was seeing something very, very strange that they had not seen in decades in some places. So my brilliant idea was, and it wasn't really, it's actually very flawed, but I didn't know why, was we created a program called the Meadowlarks. We would get master naturalists and other people from other agencies, and we said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to train you up in interpretation, and you guys are going to go out and lead monthly, weekly tours of these places and get people fired up and connected and put it in the ether. It was a miserable failure. To say it was a miserable failure is saying something, because I've had a lot. So it was like, I think I got, out of 139 people I trained, I got 3 tour guides out of it. Here's where it failed, and this is what it has to do with your question. The problem was, everybody who took the thing was over 50 years old. And that was the problem. Here's why.
Wait a minute.
You guys have, just follow me, because there's a good thing coming. You guys have the curse of knowledge. You guys are master naturalists. You've gone through the program. You see how complicated everything is. And what I could not get people to understand is that they were not plant identification Pez dispensers. That was not your role to identify everything. But once you get to a certain age, and I'm approaching 50 myself, once you approach a certain age, you think, I have to have categorical knowledge of everything, otherwise I'm going to look dumb. And I'm not going to lead a tour for anybody if I'm going to look dumb. So I got 3 people to lead tours out of that program. So this is where the youth are working out way better. So I see this gentleman, Mr. Reed, with that Rice University shirt. Now I'm a U of H guy, so it hurts me to say Rice. But we're going to put a prairie on Rice's campus in the fall. 2 acres, or 3 acres. We're going to restore this prairie. Here's what we did, though. We said, you know what? A whole bunch of old people like me, we could go and talk to the administrators. We could lead tours there. It's not going to work. And so what we've done is we've literally trained up students to be effective interpreters. Students at Rice. And high school students at Westside High School and other places. And here's the difference between those people and us. They're not afraid. They don't know how complicated life is. They will jump in there with 2 feet. And if they have a scripted story that they've helped to produce, they'll go with it. So I think that one of the things in terms of advocacy and teaching people about your issue is, like I said, you may not be the best advocate for that. I'm not always, for sure. But young people want to be engaged. They want to lead. You should see them when they lead these tours. They light up. They light up. We have a conservation biology class we're working with at Rice, and they love taking these administrators, who are usually the top dogs, and it flips that paradigm where they're the experts. They love that. So utilize young people to help you tell your story to groups that you can't speak effectively to, because it works really well. The one caveat I will say is they will not be perfect. Be okay with that. They'll misidentify stuff. Be okay with that. Sometimes they'll give facts that are kind of like, where'd you pull that out of? Be okay with that, because perfect is the enemy of the good.
So
Right.
they work well with adults and youth on tours.
Yeah.
All ages.
Yeah, I mean, listen, anybody
You're talking youth
I'm talking about like high school and college students.
No, I mean, on leading the tours, the people that they're leading, they work well dealing with adults and.
Oh, yeah, because here's the thing, older people like us are very forgiving of kids who are trying.
Right.
It's like if you try to speak a foreign language in another country, people are usually like going to give you a break. And so people love that because they like the energy, they like the fact that they're not the last in their generation, they're not the Lorax. People love that they're not the last in their line, that there's this other generation that cares. That is very inspiring to a lot of people.
We mentioned a lot of areas of community involvement where we can go out and we talked about county boards and this and that. One that hasn't been mentioned is our boards of education. When I was reviewing the literature in preparation for this, one of the things that I ran across was the challenges that public school teachers have in teaching science with certain hot button political issues. So that's another area in which we can be involved to do our best to see that science is properly represented in our schools. And I think that's another, and we've already talked about, I mean, I remember when my daughter came home and those little rubber things that holds a six-pack together, and I didn't cut them in half, and she just reamed me up one side and down the other.
Well, that I could keep talking on that, but I think let's try to move on to another question because I'm sure there's some other questions out there. Anybody?
A lot of the discussion, perhaps very appropriately, has focused on the community level, very local action. Sometimes the issues we're confronting are substantially influenced by state or federal laws, regulations, and so on. Is community level action sufficient, or are there situations where in your own work you've taken it to the state or federal level?
Well, okay. Right off the bat, I would say that obviously, community action it's extremely important. Is it going to be enough? I mean, come on. What's going to be enough is if we get a critical mass of people taking action, both at the community level, but then obviously